First World War and became very famous for leading Arab armies against the Turks. But he was a British agent, of course, but you know, he got very famous, an American newsman, and you might see the film Seven Pillars of Wisdom, or Lawrence of Arabia, where he's actually, you know, his life is, well, it's portrayed. It's a pretty pathetic picture of his life. It's not really accurate. It's somewhat accurate. Lawrence was about this big, and Peter O'Toole was about this big to start, you know, and all the inaccuracies move on from there. You know, it's totally an accurate movie. But anyway, be that as it may, it gives you some picture. And most people get their only picture of things through movies now, I guess. In any event, he thought that the Arab Bedouin were like the Hebrew tribes. But as more modern scholars have come along, a very famous archaeologist by the name of Albright, and others succeeding him, who insisted that, in fact, the Hebrews were a donkey people. I know, donkey people, that sounds like an insult, because we don't really like donkeys. We think donkeys are dumb, dirty animals. But the Arabs were a camel people. Now the Hebrews are portrayed as having camels in the Old Testament. But modern scholars say that's an anachronism. What does anachronism mean? Something that actually didn't exist but is read back in time. Hey, we're going to get our vocabulary lifted up here, if nothing else. Anachronism. Something that's read back, didn't exist at that time, or actually, yeah, it came later, but it's read back early. Scholars say, and this seems to be the appearance of Arabs, that camels were not domesticated until about 1000 BC. And that the Hebrew tribesmen were not camel caravanners. But the old texts say that what existed then were donkey caravans. And those are the caravans that went between Mesopotamia, Iraq, the Fertile Crescent, and Egypt, and those places where Hebrews developed, if you want to call it that. And there's a term for them in the ancient manuscripts, Apiru, which we have from ancient texts of that period. And these people are outsiders, outcasts, who are involved in the donkey caravan trade. Now, what does that mean, the donkey caravan trade? Well, donkeys can't go into the deep desert. Donkeys have to stay near the coastline because they can't exist without water, or can horses for that matter, for any length of time. I don't even know what the length of time is, but probably not more than a day. So they have to always be near sources of water where camels can go into the deep desert. So to domesticate a camel made it possible to go into the deep desert. So whatever Arabs are, they're somehow associated with camels. I know it's ridiculous, but that's how scholars do things. And do I think camels were only domesticated in 1000 BC? I just don't know. I really don't believe that, but that's what they say. They have no evidence for it earlier than that. And the earlier, so modern scholars began to say the difference between Arabs and Hebrews was just the difference between a donkey and a camel. Because they had to stick near the settled coastlines. So you know, you've heard of the Fertile Crescent? The area that goes from Palestine, around through Syria, over to Iraq. All that has to do with the big rivers, the water coming down from the mountains of Lebanon into the back areas around Damascus and so on. They would have to stick to those areas. They couldn't go out into the Arabian wilderness with donkeys, not even themselves. How are they going to go? If you walk 50 miles out, you're dead. You don't have a jeep. The only thing that can save you in a situation like that is a camel. So in some sense, Arab culture is predicated, according to the scholars, whether it's right or not, on the camel. And some people actually, I think Nicholson even says in his book, that the Arab is the tick of the camel. That the Arab is the tick of the camel. What does he mean by saying the Arab, or others have said it for him, the Arab is the tick of the camel? I don't mean tick-tock. I mean tick instead in terms of a parasite. A creature that lives off on other creatures. You see, actually, in American culture, the Plains Indians didn't always exist on the American plains. Most Indians existed in, like, up by Minnesota, Maine, along the coast, southern swamps, so on, but not in the plains. What did you really need to make life tenable in the plains? A horse. But why did you need the horse? That, but you needed to chase the buffalo. You couldn't chase the buffalo without a horse. You couldn't chase the buffalo on foot. And you see, you can say the Plains Indians lived off the buffalo. I don't know if you ever thought of it, but it's true. They did everything from the buffalo. They used its skins for tents, sinews for bows, its milk, everything was related to the buffalo. Not all Indians, the Plains Indians I'm talking about. And they really weren't out there until the Spanish came. Because the Spanish brought the horses to Mexico and other places, and the horses escaped and began to, thrive to some extent. Some maybe even traded, and herds of horses developed, and then they learned how to